Hello and welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Pauline and Alan, and we are breaking down the Gamecocks' 41-20 loss to Tennessee on Saturday night in Knoxville. And I have a bubble in the back of my throat. Before we get into that, though, just a couple of quick news and notes from around Gamecock land. First one is in basketball. On yesterday afternoon, South Carolina picked up their second 2024 commitment, 3-star forward Trent Noah out of Harlan, Kentucky. He's 6'7", 200 pounds. Despite the fact that he's that big body, he's really more of a fluid shooter. He really fits into what Lamont Paris says that he's been trying to build offensively, as far as the positionless basketball sort of player, where defensively he should be able to match up against some of the big men throughout the SEC as he continues to fill out. But he's not necessarily going to just like bang it inside and get all of his points in the paint. He can step out and shoot it as well. We'll have more on him in a film room later this week from Perry McCarty, but I think pretty good pickup. He's 3-star on Rivals. I've seen him a little bit higher on a couple of other services, and I think generally considered the number 2 player out of the state of Kentucky in the 2024 class. So not a bad pickup. Obviously would have paired nicely with your Cam Scott, 5-star out of Lexington. But obviously he ended up at Texas. So you whiff on your top target in 2024, but you get 2 guys. The other one, the Finnish guy that his name escapes me right now, that I think have potential, but they're a little bit of projects for sure. And then the other quick news item that came out this morning, the Florida game time has been set for 3:30 next Saturday. Alan seems pretty thrilled about it. If you are in the state of South Carolina, you know that is also State Fair weekend. So
and
traffic
homecoming.
Homecoming. So traffic is going to be not ideal in Columbia on next Saturday. Leave early, all those sorts of things, if you want to get there on time. All right, I think that's
a kickoff return that happened last year at the State Fair game. If you were late, you were down 7-0 in 10, or you missed a touchdown in 10 seconds.
With that Texas A&M?
That was a late game, yeah.
All right, yes. Let's get into what happened on Saturday night. I guess I'll just start getting both of your general takeaways from what you saw. Alan was in Knoxville. That crowd obviously played a huge factor. And then Pauline and I both kind of watched from our separate places. Alan, let's start with you since you were the one there. What's your general takeaway from what went down?
I think my first main thought, there's so much stuff to unpack from that game, I think, but my first main thing is something Shane Beamer said last night on the teleconference. Somebody's got to win a rep. Somebody's got to win a one-on-one rep. Offensive line, we can get into the PFF later, not good enough. I think we kind of saw revert back to what you saw week 1. Some perimeter stuff, blocking not quite there. I thought your secondary played okay, but D-line didn't get enough pressure on Joe Milton. Your wide receivers didn't get separation. The short yardage stuff, I think without question the worst you've seen all year. We'll get into that too. I have some usage questions there. I think you just got outplayed. Obviously there's more to it than that, and we're going to say more to it than that, but if you just go position by position across the field, Tennessee played better than you pretty much everywhere. And that goes back to someone's got to make a play, and it just kind of never came.
Yeah, I feel like as I watched the entire game or whatever, it didn't feel like Tennessee was 21 points better than you as a football team, but they made all of the plays that needed to be made.
Yes.
While South Carolina couldn't seize any of their opportunities, really. We'll get into some of those specific opportunities because that's what I talked about in the rapid reaction at length on Saturday night. And yeah, when that happens, you end up with a pretty lopsided score, even if perhaps the talent on the field isn't vastly different. I think you see a clear talent discrepancy in, say, Tennessee's defensive line and South Carolina's offensive line at the moment. which played a big factor in this one. But other than that, I thought the matchups weren't, too far off. Pauline, what about you? What's your just general takeaway from Saturday?
Well, I mean, first off, we all know that the fans can be very influential on a team,
It was
and
loud in there.
I could only imagine. But also, a lot of the feedback I was getting from back here was that they had the utmost expectations that the Gamecocks were just going to blow, even though, if we looked at the past history of the past few games, realistically speaking, that's not how it was going to go down. And because of that, I think the hate is a little bit detrimental on their part because fans flip a switch. But a lot of what I saw was I like this quote a lot because we talked about it, I think 2 weeks ago. But Coach Beamer has been putting a lot of new plays in the playbook. And one of the things that he said was the playbook basically consists of everything in the kitchen sink. So, which I mean is very true. And I kind of like it, but it's because of the fact that we don't have a strong O-line. We have to.
You got to do some different stuff.
We can, exactly. So I don't think it was a bad loss. I think it was very much of we played a great game. I mean, the resilience was there. I don't think we just couldn't connect plays. It just wasn't our bag.
So that's something you say, connect plays. Spencer said post game they never got in a rhythm all night. I think that's kind of about how I felt about it too. It never felt like you were getting blown out. I mean, even it kind of did at 31. 31-10, maybe a little bit, but then Mario pops the run out of there to get you back within 14. It was a one step forward, two steps back night the entire game, I think is kind of where I would put it.
Yeah, and really a key moment you're talking about when it started to turn into a little bit more of a lopsided game was Spencer throwing that pick six right before halftime. I think there's a lot of blame to go around on that one. That's just a play that kind of, I think probably Loggins, Spencer, everyone would want back because it just didn't make any sense, right? It's 3rd and 22. You're throwing like a 6-yard curl route or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was
probably even if it's there. Yeah, but probably even if it's on target, it's not turning into a first down. In that scenario, I've always appreciated how aggressive Beamer's mentality has been since he's been here. It's been a huge breath of fresh air compared to the Will Muschamp era. But that's one of those where I think you have to play a little bit more of a conservative game. You're only down, you're only down one score at that point, and then it very quickly becomes 2, and Tennessee's getting the ball back after the second half, and that's where it definitely sort of spiraled. To South Carolina's credit, they did they stop them coming right out of the?
No, they didn't.
Okay,
Tennessee scored, and then Mario had the one play touchdown, and then they stopped Tennessee on the next drive after that.
Yeah, so
I like your point on the fact that I liked your point on the fact that it's not. There's no one player to blame. I think that it wasn't you can't put all of the mistakes on the fact that Spencer was running the ball and then he threw a pick six, and then there's so many moving parts that just again didn't connect. But I like the point that you said where there's no one person that screwed up today. It was basically just a learning experience, unfortunately.
It was Tennessee making the plays that you need to win a football game, and South Carolina missing those plays. You can look at some statistical points where you probably felt pretty good, right? You got 2 interceptions off of Milton. For the most part, I thought you kind of held their running game in check, although Jalen Wright had a couple of big-time runs, including a 42-yard touchdown. It kind of got away from you maybe down the stretch. Ultimately, Tennessee ends up with 238 rushing yards overall, and they averaged 6 a carry. But it didn't really feel that way, I guess, in real time. It felt like your defense was holding up well enough. But every time you had an opportunity to kind of crawl your way back into it, you didn't take advantage of it. I wrote about that a little bit in the rapid reaction, but if you want to look at some of these specific times, you had two fourth down conversions that you failed, 4th and 1s. One was a failed 4th down conversion after you had pulled off a pretty great fake punt to kind of keep a drive going, and another one a little bit later where you had 2nd and 2, 2nd and 1, 2nd and 2.
Yep. Mario stopped twice, then Spencer stopped on a sneak.
Right, and at that point you were driving early in the third quarter with some momentum and just really couldn't finish that drive. So you had your opportunities and you fell short of them. I don't know. That's
the story of the game. I think the third, we'll start with your first one there. You're down 14-10 at that point, driving to try to take a lead or cut it to one with a field goal. You hit the fake punt. You got the momentum. 3rd and 1. I was confused at the time. Shane Beamer sort of explained it yesterday on the teleconference, and I'm still confused. I'm not really sure why that was a Juju McDowell carry in that spot. He said because they wanted to go tempo, and that was the personnel that was in the game.
It's the kitchen sink.
I can understand not wanting Tennessee to sub in that spot. I do get that. But I think we're all in agreement that in short yardage, between the tackles, tough running, Juju McDowell was 3rd out of 3 main running backs. He's 5'8". He's 170-something pounds. Like, that just felt like the spot. We've talked about the carry on Joyner on the goal line and how he's tough to tackle in short yardage. We've seen Mario get those carries. I thought that was a very weird usage decision on that play. And then Juju loses a yard. Obviously, you're going for it. You're not going to kick a field goal after you just faked a punt. And then you somehow throw the ball short of the sticks on 4th and 2, which is pretty hard to do when you just think about the space there. And I think that was another thing from the game too. You talk about just making plays. Tennessee tackled really well in space.
They did, yeah.
I think a lot of the game plan was just trusting guys to make someone miss, to Tennessee to miss tackles, and that just didn't happen. And there was never really a counter punch for that once it was clear Tennessee was not going to miss tackles, and the stuff short of the sticks wasn't going to get you where it needed to go.
Yeah, I definitely think your story offensively, I wrote about this a little bit too, is that you went a lot more horizontal than vertical.
Yes.
So Spencer Rattler still had a decent completion percentage, 69%. I mean, you'll take that. He was 24 of 35, but for only 169 yards, you really didn't get down the field very often at all. In these other games throughout the season, you have seen this screen game work a lot to try to create a little bit of a run game when the run game hasn't been there or whatever. But you've still had some shots down the field to Xavier Legette or Amarian Brown or whoever, Eddie Lewis, who we didn't even see very much at all.
One snap.
A lot of that is credit to Tennessee's defensive front being in Spencer's face all night, 6 sacks. And also Spencer Rattler after the game said, and I'll have to go back and kind of verify all of those sacks, but some of those sacks were coverage sacks. So your guys weren't getting open down the field, even when you did have the time to get it downfield. So you do have to credit Tennessee's defense for having a good game plan against what South Carolina has shown thus far this year.
Definitely
you really just go ahead.
No, I was just saying definitely predictable, as in the fact that we all knew that Spencer is definitely more likely to run the ball than throw it. I mean, which is kind of where I was going to get at. I personally I don't know. I don't know if it's because Juice isn't in
That's what I was going to say.
right now, or it's just how he is. But you have Xavier Legette, who clearly has proven he is one of our main modes of scoring, and it doesn't seem like, I don't know if there's a disconnect, but every time that he's throwing it to him, he's going deep down the field. So I mean, I don't understand if he's waiting for Juice or if it's just that's his preference, but I don't know if that's something Shane wants to talk to him about.
The Juice thing was pretty obvious Saturday night. That was the first time all year you're looking at that and going, okay, Juice isn't here, and that's an issue.
Yeah,
because no one can get separation on the outside. That's a credit to Tennessee's DBs for sure. They played about a 180 from what they played last year in this game, but there was nobody, again, going back to what Shane said last night, I think kind of all roads lead back to there. Somebody's got to win a one-on-one. Someone's got to beat the guy lined up across from them. That just wasn't happening most of the night, especially on the perimeter.
And someone's got to step up as a number 2. I think throughout the season, people have started to, opposing defenses defenses and defensive coordinators have started to see that Xavier Legette is obviously the number one option. He still is winning some battles even when they're focusing on him. But as that focus continues to shift towards him and he's getting doubled or whatever, like someone else has to step up and take some pressure off of him, or we might see a lot more of this.
If you lose him, regardless, like it's down.
That's again, just you kind of running through what Shane Beamer said, and we've heard this almost after every week this year. I think Shane actually said, "I know you guys are tired of hearing me saying this. ... We've got to play the freshmen more." Okay, well, that's fine. You got if you need them to be ready. Tyshawn Russell played 7 snaps on offense. Nick Harbor played 6. That's kind of on you. I mean, if you want to play the freshmen more, they got to be in the game more. And I think Tyshawn Russell's been fine. I think he gives you a little bit of something in the slot there. I don't know. I guess I'm at the point you start looking at the roster usage. Okay, Legette, Omega, you feel good there. If you get Juice back, that goes without saying. Do you really need 24 snaps of Luke Doty in the slot? Do you really need that? Luke Doty lining up in motion, Luke Doty pre-snap stuff. Like,
and he's been sure-handed, and it does give you like a little bit of flexibility, say to set up a trick play or whatever. But I think to your point, I don't know that you need 24 snaps of that. Maybe 10, and then those other 14 are going to some of these freshmen and getting them some game reps and letting them open it up. I imagine if you're going to make a move to the freshmen, the bye week is a good time to do so.
Yes.
As we're heading into it, and then you have a home game against I think a beatable Florida team who they just got trounced by Kentucky.
We can get into that later, but I think you're going to have to win that game.
Yeah, it's
one
a big
of the
one.
things I think, though. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
what was your question?
Okay, one of the things I was going to say though, in regards to freshmen, I think a lot of people are expecting an instance like when Nick Emimori had to step up as a freshman and he blew everybody's mind. And I don't think that's going to happen this season. Maybe a miracle.
Kilgore's your closest.
Kilgore, yeah. I thought Kilgore played really well
playing the same position. But it's definitely tougher at other positions too. I mean,
well, the reality of it is that like no one's going to probably be like first. I feel like maybe a second like line, but I don't know if they will ever be holding a position. I mean, I guess Nick Harbor maybe, but.
Well, I think you don't want to have to depend on freshmen that way. And I think by necessity, you're kind of having to at this point. Tree Babalade, do you still have those PFF scores pulled up in front of you?
I sure do.
what it is?
Tree's number was Saturday night?
What it
was low.
Yeah.
That is a 34.6 on 64 offensive snaps.
And I do want to lead, and I said this in the rapid reaction. I think he's going to have a great career here. I think he's got NFL potential. I think he's a great prospect. He's a true freshman playing against an elite defensive end in James Pierce, and he looks like it exactly. Pierce only had 2 sacks, and then I felt like he affected so many more plays that didn't even show up in the stat sheet necessarily.
That's an NFL defensive lineman for sure.
Definitely, and maybe we got a little bit ahead of ourselves because Tree did hold up so well against Georgia's defensive front, but Georgia's defensive front really hasn't played up to their potential yet this season. I don't think in general. They only have 2 sacks on the season or 3 sacks. It's a low number. And yeah, we saw one-on-one against an elite D lineman. He's not quite ready for that spotlight, I don't think. I do think that you try to chip with tight ends and running backs a good bit, but I don't know. You still need those tight ends as weapons too. We saw Trey Knox get a game ball in the loss from Shane Beamer. He was kind of the bailout option a few times on some of those plays. But
a touchdown taken off the board by a false start, which he scored on the drive anyway. But he was wide open in the end zone on that play.
He seems to be wide open very often.
He's good at finding space.
Especially at home when I'm on the field, he's literally almost in the end zone, and it goes back to the whole like Spencer being under pressure. Like he can't.
And that's the problem. You need him in to block more often than not too. So I don't think if you we're drawing it up on paper that Loggins is getting to run the offense the way that he wants to, because he's having to work around this offensive line. And this is something that we've talked about every week, but it came back to bite you in a way that we haven't seen since week 1 this past week.
So I guess kind of taking stock of that big picture. Okay, you're 2-3 at the bye. I think we all agree the schedule lightens up down the stretch. Not that it's easy, but the tough part of your schedule's over. You're Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina away from home in the rearview mirror. What's fixable here and what's just going to be what this team is kind of what I wrote post-game in Knoxville. If you want to go check that out, if you're a subscriber. How much of this can you fix in 13 days where you play Florida? And how much of this is just, okay, this is 2023 South Carolina football, work around it, is my question.
I think it's the latter.
Yeah, and I think there are better days ahead for some of these problems. Like we're talking about the offensive line. We've seen them play good against Georgia. We've seen them play pretty good against Mississippi State. I think playing at home, these like 5 out of the last 7 games is going to be helpful. That Tennessee crowd did the offensive line no favors. We saw a couple of false starts. You can't account for checking at the line and stuff and whether or not they were even on assignment all the time because of how loud that crowd is. That's not something that you're necessarily going to know as an outside observer, but those guys in that room know if they miss some assignments there. Yeah, I think that's something that is going to continue to improve throughout the season. You're starting 2 freshmen on the road in the SEC. That's a recipe for disaster most of the time.
I do think that'll be better. For me, it's the freshman thing. And you look at both sides of the ball too. Pop Howard, 19 snaps for the second week in a row. Doing quick math, it's a little bit more than a quarter of the plays in the game. Okay. I thought Pop Howard played pretty well. The PFF grading agrees with that. I'm not going to give the number away. You should subscribe and read the website later. But I thought he played pretty well. I thought you finally saw some linebacker depth that we've been hearing about. Bam Martin-Scott had a sack. I think that was first of his career. Also, by the way, while we're talking about linebackers, Ronnie Porter with the hit of the night on special teams.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere for sure.
What the hell was that?
Hey,
it was pretty funny.
Little pat on the helmet for him for sure.
Yeah, but getting back to the actual point there, I think you saw some of that. I just think you're a little bit thinner up front than maybe you thought. Well, TJ Sanders was banged up. He had a shoulder. Nick Barrett's been dealing with a little bit, although I thought he played pretty well too. And again, who's ready? Is Xavier McLeod ready? Is Desmond Umeozulu ready? Can you get those players ready over a bye week? I'm going to be very interested to see coming into that Florida game and really the rest of the year, but Florida's the first opportunity. Who plays how much and kind of are these freshmen? Who took a step during the bye week, I guess, is kind of what you got to evaluate. And how much can they help you win immediately? Because I think we're all in agreement that Florida now becomes vital for doing anything this season.
And not to digress too far. Sorry, I'll let you hop in just a second. How many snaps did Umeozulu get the other night?
Desmond Umeozulu played 10 snaps out of 74 on defense.
See, I thought I must have just been cued in on those few snaps that he was in or whatever, but I thought he played well while he was in there. He had a couple of pressures and he blew up one running play that I can remember. So I will be interested to see if he gets a little bit more playing time after that performance. Maybe the other 5 plays that he was in that I didn't notice him in, he made some freshman mistakes or something. I don't know. But Pauline, what were you going to say? Sorry.
No, I just, to your point, both of y'all's points. One, I think it's both sides more of the fact that it is what it is. Like, these are our players. They were recruited for a reason. But I think the bye week is going to be used as let's start from scratch and kind of see if we can put together any better plays, because that's all this entire season's about. And freshmen like Pop Howard, again, reason why they are here playing for South Carolina, because they are that talented. It's just more of the fact that a lot of the experienced players that we ended up by the end of the season last season having a great identity and were playing amazingly. The expectation should not be there because it's just not the reality of the situation.
That I do think, though, you bring up a good point. If you're holding on to hope right now, if you're trying to get through these 2 weeks off a loss, both years so far under Shane Beamer, this team has finished better than it started. I mean, we've talked a lot about those last 2 games of last season, but you also grinded out a trip to a bowl game in 21 down to your 4th quarterback of the year in November by that point. So I think you combine that with what you're hoping is freshman development with 5 out of your last 7 games are going to be at home. I don't think the sky's falling, but again, I think this is a very critical bye week and obviously a very critical game coming out of it.
To be fair, the SEC expectation, I think, is
the expectation is probably higher than it should be.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, Pauline, you brought this up earlier too. I think because of the way that South Carolina beat Tennessee last year, the fan base perhaps had different expectations going into this game than maybe they should have.
I was getting answers of 90-0 and then cost by 90.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, guys, you're about to get your dreams crushed. I'm so sorry.
But I mean, Alan, you picked South Carolina to lose but cover. I picked South Carolina to win close. I think we thought that this matchup was going to be tough, but a winnable one on the road based on how they played thus far. But I don't think either of us necessarily foresaw the offensive line taking the step back that they did, which probably is still the story of how this one ended up the way that it did. I think Spencer Rattler still played relatively well for how much pressure was in his face. Obviously, he would like to have that pick 6 back, which was a big momentum swing. But yeah, I think if we're talking realistic expectations, 2-3 at this point of the season is not crazy. We all kind of said that was a possibility before the season, that you needed to split Mississippi State and UNC, which they did. You had to win Furman, and they've looked competitive on the road against 2 tough opponents in Georgia and Tennessee. Maybe the Georgia game made you feel a little bit more confident going into this one than you should have, or whatever. I still think pretty much everything is ahead of you. 5 of your last 7 at home. I wrote about this a little bit in the rapid reaction. I think if you're looking for a silver lining, there's plenty of opportunity to go around. That said, Missouri and Kentucky maybe look a little bit tougher than they did preseason.
A&M looks fine with a backup quarterback. They haven't missed a beat.
Right. So by no means, I mean, you're playing in the SEC. It's never going to be easy. Do I still think that you could get to 7 wins? Yeah, probably. I think that's definitely a possibility. I agree that this Florida game is pretty key now as you come out of this bye week. South Carolina's been pretty good out of the bye.
They have been good off the bye. I think that's a good point too. What were you going to say, Pauline?
No, I was just saying, like, after this past game of Florida and Kentucky, I definitely feel like Florida is more. Florida, they
got beat by Kentucky, yeah.
So, I mean, for us, a little bit of boost of confidence. I mean, it shouldn't be we're gonna win because God knows,
I don't think you should be afraid of Florida if you put it. If you
right. Absolutely not. I think they'll come in pretty aggressive, but it'll be like kind of like for them, like they need this win for them to be like upping their confidence.
We've had this conversation. I don't even know how many times the last 2 years, 3 years. Yes, Florida's going to turn around and hand the ball off 30 times. Yes, you need to have an answer for that. That's what it's going to be with ETN. Right. We could get into that more next week for sure. But also Florida doesn't stop the run either. If you can get that going a little bit, if you can maybe look the way you did against Mississippi State in that game, we know Mario at least has some explosive running ability. You saw that on Saturday at Knoxville. That feels like a spot where maybe you can get your running game going a little bit, start getting into some play action a little bit for Spencer. Look, it's at home. It's off a bye week. You're going to be as healthy as you've been all year, probably just by virtue of not playing for 2 weeks. It's a team you lost to last year, but beat the year before. Last time you had them at home. Go win the game.
They were very good when we played them last year. Like, they were in a good position, and we were.
They had their best game of the season, and South Carolina probably had their worst. So,
yeah.
Now, you did mention Mario Anderson. Is it safe to say that the DeCarrion Joyner starting running back experiment is over, should be over? I mean, outside of that one run, which, I hate when people like take away if he didn't have that run, because he did. And it was a great run, 75-yard touchdown run. But outside of that, he was 9 carries for 26 yards. Kind of the same as what you saw with Mississippi State. That said, I still think that he's done enough at this point compared to everyone else on the roster that he's got to be your main back going forward.
It just comes down to how you want to use Joyner. I still think he should be getting more run and short yardage. He's just so tough to tackle in those kind of situations with bodies into the trenches. And you start to wonder if that game goes a little bit differently. If maybe it's Joyner instead of Juju on that 3rd and 1. Maybe it's Joyner instead of Anderson on that 2nd and 2 in the 3rd quarter. There's a role for Dakereon Joyner running the ball.
Definitely.
But also, I think this is a little bit, again, goes back to the freshman thing. You get more DJ Braswell. If you're really hesitant right now to play Tyshawn Russell and Nick Harbor at wide receiver, you do have Dakereon Joyner. He's done that before. He was a wide receiver. I mean, I don't necessarily know if that's what the staff wants to do, if DJ's not ready, if they don't want to take him out of that running back role. I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Like, you can line up Dakereon Joyner in the slot, and he can do that. It's just more natural position.
Clearly they're not afraid of it with Luke. So clearly
that's what I mean. Though. That's if Luke Doty can do that 24 times, Dakereon Joyner definitely can.
Yeah, and it's possible that he does show back up in the slot a little bit. Go ahead, Pauline.
No, I was going to say, I just made a note of when the game was going on, the announcers were talking, this was about Xavier, but I applied it to Mario as well. But he quoted, made themselves, he made himself, as in, he's proved why he's there. And I think Mario, that also applies to Mario. He developed himself as a D1 player in the matter of couple months.
If you're talking high points of that game as a South Carolina fan, it was really cool to see Mario score a 75-yard touchdown in front of 100,000 people, considering where he came from.
That.
And the broadcast did do a good job of kind of showing his reaction on the sideline afterwards, and he's feeling proud and well deserved. Agreed. We've talked about this running back room for almost a year now, basically since Marshawn Lloyd went into the portal at the end of last year, and its limitations. But he definitely deserves a pat on the back for how hard he's worked, and the fact that he's proven that he at least belongs in Power 5 football. Good for him. All right, other, I guess, lessons heading into the bye week. We've seen 4 games at this point, and they've been kind of wildly inconsistent on the way that they. Yeah, 5 games. You're right. Sorry. 5 games at this point, and they've been kind of wildly inconsistent in each of their narratives. What do we feel like we confidently can say about the South Carolina football team from a positive standpoint heading down the back half of the season? What are some things that we feel like we can depend on as this is their identity?
You can go ahead if you want, Pauline.
Okay. I was just going to say, back to the individual talent that we have, I see it as basically we're molding a piece of clay right now. And we have all those little pieces, or it's just not where we need it to be. Trey Knox is a great asset to us. And honestly, I feel like he hasn't gotten as much recognition or the right plays as much just on the field from Spencer or I don't know. Because when he does play, he's very he's on it and he makes amazing plays. But I don't know if Spencer has clicked in his head, made that relationship and that bond that he did with Juice. Or I mean, I know they're different, but in the sense that the confidence wise, at least, because clearly we are trying all different types of plays and stuff. There's no consistency, like you said. So, I mean, why not use him? Why not use DK in a different position if we already have Mario? I think that's something to look forward to, in the sense that you guys out there, Gamecock fans, have to understand that all these players are very talented. It's just they're new and the identity isn't set in stone yet. And that's what I think going into this bye week is going to be a huge focus.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have some pieces that definitely work. It's just getting it all to work together, and I think one of the big reasons it hasn't is just the protection with the offensive line, because you need time for those plays to develop. But yeah, all right. So individual players, and I agree, a lot of them are veterans, right? Trey Knox, Xavier Legette, Spencer Rattler, DeCarian Joyner in the role that he's carved out. Mario Anderson has taken a step forward. What about you, Alan? What are some things that you feel like are kind of starting to solidify about this 2023 Gamecock team?
You will have the better quarterback on the field most, if not all, the games left on your schedule. I mean, if you want to split hairs about maybe a Devin Leary, if you're a club guy person, most of the games the rest of the year, you're going to have the better quarterback on the field. Most of the games the rest of the year, you will have the best receiver on the field with Legette, maybe not like Mizzou, Luther Burden, some of that. But most of the games, you will. So I think you start there. That's your bread and butter. I think you have something that works there. Your DBs, I know DQ Smith's had a rough couple of weeks, but Jalen Kilgore looks like a player. Nick Eamon looks good as ever. I think you're going to get healthier there too. You're going to get David Spalding getting some more reps. I think you feel pretty good about your DBs in general. Not saying they're going to not have some rough nights, facing some good passing games, but I think those are the two things you kind of hang your hat on right now. Just in terms of having an identity. It's what we've seen throughout the Shane Beamer era, but I think it's those two things. And then, I think youth is kind of what it doesn't count as an identity. And,
4 years.
I think what you're looking at is you feel good about this. I mean, I'd say early returns right now, you feel good about this freshman class, right? You feel good about Pup. You feel good about Umuzulu. You feel good. Yeah, Saturday night aside, you feel good. Kilgore for sure, but Tree aside, Saturday night aside, you feel good about him. Tro, same thing. And you can lean on that as these players get better every week, play more every week, get the feel of them a little bit more. And then special teams. I mean, we haven't talked about it much, but I think that was probably the best special teams game of the year Saturday. Hit the fake punt. Mitch Jeter hit 2 good long field goals.
Pinned him deep a couple times.
Kai had a good night. And I still think you can hang your head on that.
The majority of the score-making players is our special teams, but
no, I mean it was part of it.
There are solid actual team on our in total. We are pretty much secure on that.
I mean, Alan mentioned you generally feel like you have the best quarterback against everyone that you're going to face the rest of the season. I think you generally feel like you have the plus sign in special teams against everyone that you're going to face the rest of the season. And we've seen that impact games. I mean, the clearest example is probably Clemson last year, right? You win that game because you have the better special teams straight up. So
I think you can definitely feel good about that, especially against a Florida team that struggled on special teams this year. If you're just looking at that game right out of the bye immediately.
Yeah, and I think your biggest question marks are continue to be: can you stop the run on the edge? Something that they struggled with last year, something we kind of expected them to struggle with this year because of the list of newcomers at edge that are still settling in. I think that there's some talent there. I think that they've probably held up better than I would have expected a few months ago. But ultimately, there's some big plays that broke this past week. And then, your offensive line, can they continue to get better? Can you start to get a little bit more creative with how you use the tight ends so that it's not having to stay in and block all the time? Can you hit Trey Knox and Joshua Simon down the field, because both of them have shown that they can get open down the field? It's really tough, but it comes down to the trenches. And South Carolina, their 2 biggest question marks going into the season were in the trenches, and the 2 biggest things that have kind of beaten them and the 3 losses that they have come down to the trenches.
And then I just wanted to throw in one more, not so much on the strength, the weakness, the whatever. Big picture of this program, take a 30,000-foot view. What's the expectation? Were you obviously you wanted to maybe get back to that 8 win, but if you took a step back to 7, but you got a lot of freshmen in and you felt good about this class going into next year where you're going to stack another class, I think most realistic people would be okay with that. 6, you're kind of frustrated, I think, but I don't think the sky's falling. Obviously, if you miss a bowl game, I think everybody would tell you that shouldn't happen with the level of quarterback play you've gotten. So you have 7 games left. You got to go 4-3 to get to a bowl game, and I think 5-2 to get to the point most people would consider a successful season. Do you think that's on the table? I mean, I still think it's possible.
I think a bowl game should still be. I think a bowl game should still be within the realm of expectation.
Yes, I agree with you. I think 6 is the floor if you're a Gamecock fan. 6 is the floor right now, where I think you still feel okay. I'm definitely with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, you got 2 semi-automatic wins in Jacksonville,
State,
and Vanderbilt.
Yep.
So that gets you to 4, and then you have several toss-ups starting with this Florida game coming out of the bye. I think 6 feels fairly safe still. I do agree that 7 and beyond is where you start to feel like, okay, they did what you guys said before. Like, they got better throughout the season, and you feel good about going into next year. I did see some sentiment online yesterday, and maybe this goes back to Pauline's point about expectations going into this game, that some people were starting to be out on Clayton White or Beamer or, Rattler, whatever, like all these sort of hot takes. And look, fan bases are going to fan base. You have a losing record 5 games into the season. I don't know what other people's expectations were, but whatever. Sometimes people are just going to say everything's on fire no matter what. I think it's very premature for pretty much any of those takes at the moment. Recruiting is going pretty well. I do think there's going to be some concern if you lose a lot in the portal this offseason again, like you did last season. But if you can keep pretty much everyone around, bring in that 2024 class that is small but highly rated, and pick up some pieces in the portal like you have the past 2 off seasons, I think you feel fine about where everything is going to be. And this could be viewed as a consolidating kind of status quo year, reloading for whatever's coming next, where you have a young Lenore Sellers, you have Dante Reno coming into the program, you have all of these names that we think are going to
linemen. I mean, you talk about can help up front. They're going to be freshmen. They're going to make mistakes. If you bring in a Cam Pringle, a guy like that, like Josiah Thompson, yeah.
Dylan Stewart on the edge, pretty much all of your
trench guys we just talked about.
Exactly. Have started to be filled in the 23 and 24 class. Those guys are just freshmen and on high school squads right now, so it's going to take a minute.
Yeah, that's go ahead, Pauline.
One of the things that I was going to say, though, to your point, is that one of the great things about Coach Beamer is his ability to recruit. And I think since coming to South Carolina, that was his whole intention of the program, is to, beef this team up. We're going to have great players now, and we still have great players like currently playing, but it'll take time for them to develop. And that's his whole game plan, is that it's not going to be, again, an immediate change, but like going after these kids, expanding his reach of players that he's trying to
stuff. Yeah.
That's where he's known for it. So, I mean, like, that's what we're waiting for, basically.
I guess what I would end on is, if people like tangible stuff, you put a number on it. For me, at least, you guys might feel differently. Scale of 1 to 10. 1, you're winning the national championship, everything's fine. 10 is the building's on fire and everything's burning. Panic level is like a 3.5, 4 right now. I think you still feel generally okay as long as you're still. I think most of us said 2 and 3 at the bye. 3.5, 4 maybe. Although I do think if you lose to Florida and you're staring at the Mizzou A&M back to back at 2 and 4, that probably goes to about a 7 or an 8. In my opinion,
maybe for this season. Talking about the program, I'm still going to be below 5. I think pretty much no matter what happens.
Yeah, I said for this. Yeah, okay. For this season, I think your panic level goes to a 7 or 8 if you lose to Florida. And I think right now you're at about a 3.
And if I'm looking at the program. If I'm looking at the program in general, I think it's solidly a 2 or a 3. The reason that some Gamecock fans might be saying 4, 5, 6, whatever, probably is because of the last guy that was in the building. You had Will Muschamp, who overachieved the first 2 years, got paid, and then the wheels fell off. And there are perhaps some within the fan base that are worried that that's happening again. To me, that's not the narrative that's happening. But
to me, that's not
an interesting trend to see if, like, how people hopped into the transfer portal last year, like jumped ship from our team. If that is a growing trend, like if that is something that keeps happening, that should be a concern for us.
I think Caleb said that a few minutes ago, but that would worry. That would up your panic meter. I think if you go into this offseason, you lose some players. I mean, you're losing Spencer to the NFL. You're probably going to lose Juice. I mean, you will lose Juice. Leggett, you're gonna have to play some pieces.
It's possible he comes back if he doesn't.
He might stay another year. He's like
if he doesn't get a full season and just flashes a little bit at the end of the year. It depends on when he comes back from his injury. But if he doesn't get a full season, he might come back.
But you're gonna have passing game pieces to replace.
Yeah,
that's again goes back to you need Tyshawn Russell, you need Nick Harbor, you need Elijah Caldwell. I don't think played at all this year. He didn't travel Saturday.
We heard good stuff for him in the summer. So I think wide receiver portal recruiting has been pretty good so far.
You're going to need at least one, I think. Just
you got Juice out of the portal. Eddie Lewis, I think, has flashed, even though we haven't seen him, who they got this past offseason. So Amarian Brown, you got out of the portal. I think you're probably going to see some of that for sure.
Yep. That's, I think, about our state of the program for the bye week. Everybody take a deep breath. You don't have to watch another game until 13 days. Take a breath. Sad. I know. Enjoy some football on your bye week. Some other games this week. Some fall weather. It's going to be okay. It is.
Yeah. And we will pop back on here on Thursday to talk a little bit more bye week storylines and still give you our picks for the national games of the week and all that fun stuff.
It might be a little bit of
might be a little bit of a shorter episode, but we'll still pop on later in the week. But until then, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. Check out all of our content reviewing this Tennessee game. We'll have some fun bye week content throughout the week as well on GamecockScoop.com, and we'll see you later.